You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou, and it's that time again, Friday, which means we must dive into Sunday's slate of games in the NFL. And today we are looking at week number 8 of the season, coming off a Thursday night football matchup where the Chargers ran away with the game against the Minnesota Vikings. And now we look forward to a Sunday slate that I would say has a lot of heavy favorites to it. Some teams that I do think can pull off some upsets, and we'll get into them. But a week that I would just say that is filled with games that has a lot of, I feel, decisive type of winners. But as always, I invite you all to comment down below. Let me hear from you. Thoughts, opinions on the matchups, who you like, who you dislike, who are you taking, and why or why not. And as a reminder, no gambling advice here. We're here for a good time. We're here to talk some football. If that's not for you, that's fine. If it's for you, fantastic. If you're somebody who likes to gamble and likes to hang out and watch anyways, comment down below. What do you got your money on this week? I know plenty of people watch who gamble, even though I don't myself. That being said, first game we're going to dive into, as we always do, early window first, and we'll work our way through the Sunday. We'll start with Dolphins and Falcons here. Miami season feels like it's basically up in flames already, and Atlanta is in a position right now where they're kind of in a must-win. You probably would have expected them to have more wins than they do so far this season, especially with just how they've looked at certain stages of the year, but they keep just kind of bouncing back and forth with wins and losses. But Miami, though, they are in a hell of a spot because it feels like every time either Mike McDaniel, the head coach, or Tua Tagovailoa takes the stage or the podium to say something to the media, there is just like slop coming out of their mouths about nonsense or just saying things that they should not be saying to the media. And it has me really worried for the direction of this Miami Dolphins team. And it feels like there is nowhere to go but down right now. I will say, though, that when I look at the game itself, for Atlanta's side of things, I'm very much looking at Bijan Robinson. He has been otherworldly for this team so far this season, and with Michael Penix being a little bit of a mixed bag this season, it's the Bijan Robinson show on that offense. Yes, you have Drake London. Yes, you have Kyle Pitts, and yes, you have Bijan Robinson as a weapon, but it has not been a stellar season, I would say, so far for Michael Penix. But Bijan Robinson himself has been unbelievable. Second in scrimmage yards right now with 914 on the season. A lot of conversation about him being one of the best, if not the best player in the NFL as things currently stand. And then you have a Miami run defense that coming into this one here is literally the league's worst, allowing 159 yards per game on the ground. They're allowing 5.2 yards per attempt, which is tied for third most in the NFL right now. And they've allowed 34 different runs over 10 yards or more, which is a league high right now, according to Next Gen Stats. This feels like a game where Bijan Robinson could absolutely take over. And even if Michael Penix doesn't necessarily have a surge back in performance, you can rely on a guy and a talent like a Bijan Robinson to expose a defense that's been pretty soft so far this season and a team that's just kind of going through a ton of issues right now. And as I kind of alluded to for the Dolphins side of things, I'm really starting to get a little bit worried about not only the play of what Tua is putting on the football field, but also just some of the comments he's making to the media on top of that. It's been a bit of a nightmare for him on both sides of things. He has 6 interceptions in the last 2 games, 3 in each of those 2. And then you go to like the comments that he had this week to the media speaking after a practice talking about the lack of targets that Jalen Waddle's getting in this offense and him not necessarily being the tallest guy in the world and struggling to see him down the football field. This is not the type of stuff you want to hear coming from your team at any stage of any season. And when you go up against an Atlanta Falcons defense that's been pretty good against the pass, they are second best in yards per game allowed. They've allowed only 11 passing touchdowns, which is tied for second as well. They're a top 10 team in sack and pressure rate this year. It feels like this is a bit of a mismatch, so I'm leaning Miami Falcons. Whoa, Atlanta Falcons, excuse me, with a 27-17 decisive victory. With this game especially being in Atlanta, it makes me feel pretty comfortable about what the Falcons do, but the matchup itself obviously helps with that. I think Atlanta wins a fairly comfortable matchup and gets themselves back in the win column. The next one we'll look at is the Bears and Ravens matchup, and this is kind of one that a lot of people have been waiting for on Baltimore's end of things because this is a football team tattered, bruised, battered, you name it, they've been dealing with it when it comes to the injury front in Baltimore, all the way down from basically it feels like every starting player at some given point on the defense, and then losing Lamar Jackson for a stretch of time as well with a hamstring injury. They're coming off a bye week. They're looking really healthy, and everyone seems to feel pretty good about the direction that this team could be heading post-bye week in all these injuries. However, Chicago's coming to town, and they're riding a 4-game win streak, and I think the big thing we need to have the discussion about with Chicago's defense right now has got to be the rate at which they are forcing turnovers right now. You're looking at 15 takeaways in their last 4 games, damn near an average of 4 total turnovers per game at this stage right now. Lamar Jackson's obviously notorious for protecting the football. He does a really good job. He only has 1 season, which is crazy to think about so far. 1 season in his career where he's ever hit the double digits in terms of interceptions thrown. He doesn't fumble the ball very often as well. He does a fantastic job of taking care of the ball. He actually only has 1 interception on the season so far. But the thing you do need to remember, though, is a Derrick Henry who has dealt with some very untimely fumbles this season. And I'm very curious to see if a team like Baltimore, who is typically known for being a little bit more disciplined than most, maybe finds themselves falling into the same problems that the last 4 teams have found themselves in facing this Chicago Bears defense that just loves to get after the football. They are one of the most, not only aggressive defenses this season, they're probably the most aggressive defense this season, but they're one of the more aggressive defenses I feel like I've ever seen as far as just the way football is played today. It's rather incredible to watch the way they can attack the football, get after it, whether it's getting the ball out of a player's hands or taking away the football through the air. It's really impressive stuff and something that Baltimore needs to be careful of here. With Baltimore, like we talked about, injuries been a big problem here. Defense hopefully looking to finally figure it out now that they're healthy. And I mean, for what it's worth, you look at the numbers so far, their defense, 5th most in passing yards, 7th most in rushing yards, they're 1st in points per game allowed at 32. All eyes are going to be on this defense and how they fare against this Bears offense that seems to be finding itself a little bit more each and every single week. And ultimately, their identity is starting to take form as a team that can run the football and beat you up physically at the line of scrimmage on the ground. You see the way DeAndre Swift has played the last couple of weeks. He's racked up 232 yards in the last 2 games that he's played, and then that's just on the ground. We're not talking receiving here, just on the ground specifically. You had Kyle Monangai also have a really strong week last week as well with 81 yards. I think the Bears give this team a fight, but there is a piece of me that really feels like Baltimore maybe finds themselves this week and gets themselves back in the win column. There's also that edge of kind of desperation sitting at, what is it, 1-5 that they're at right now at this point in the season? You got to win a football game, and it's got to start this week. The Ravens need to win at minimum like 9 more games this season if they want to find themselves in the playoffs. The top of the AFC feels really heavy right now, at least record-wise with how the standings look. You got to start winning, and it's got to start this week. Chicago can at least afford the loss. It's in Baltimore. Baltimore's a little bit more desperate in my opinion, so I do think that maybe Baltimore is able to get this one done. I do expect the defense to still have some, I guess, growing pains because they haven't all been healthy at the same time it feels like this season so far, so maybe there's a little bit of that to it as well. But I like Baltimore 28-24 to get the W, get back in the win column, and at least try to get this season back on track. Next, we're looking at the Bills and the Panthers here, and I think the very easy question for Buffalo in this one, with some of the issues that we've seen from them defensively so far this season, has got to be if they're able to slow down Rico Dowdle. Chuba Hubbard made his return last week for Carolina, did not really find a ton of success on the ground here, but it really is all about what this Panthers team has been able to do on the offense on the ground. When you look at Rico Dowdle and the 468 rushing yards he's had in the last 3 games so far this season, they're going to keep giving him the rock, especially if Chuba Hubbard doesn't catch fire and kind of get back to what he had been showing over the last season or so. You have to go with the hot hand there. You can't just ignore what Rico Dowdle did in those 2 or 3 games that Chuba Hubbard was absent from. He's exploded for this offense. He was a big reason why this team has been able to rattle off so many wins the last few weeks. You can't just go away from that. And for Buffalo's run defense, that has not exactly been very good so far this season. They've allowed 156 yards per game, which is second most in the NFL, only to the Miami Dolphins. And then you look at what Bijan Robinson did to you a couple of weeks ago prior to your bye week, 19 carries, 179 yards, averaging 8.9 yards per attempt. You also look back at some of the other games they had. Baltimore obviously went for 238 in the season opener, and you look at a team like New Orleans who went for 189 yards on the ground against them as well. They've let up 130 in another game on top of that. They have been prone to really big games on the ground defensively, and you got Rico Dowdle at home. This could be a problem for Buffalo's defense. On the flip side, I look at their offense, and I know I'm kind of like hyper fixating on the Bills for this matchup preview here, but a lot of the questions for me right now, wildly enough, in this matchup between Buffalo and Carolina is not with Carolina. It's my concerns with Buffalo. Is the offense okay? They're averaging 17 points per game in their last two matchups. Back-to-back losses. They did not look good going into their bye week. And on top of that, an offense that was really good at protecting the football, going through their last two games, turning the ball over 5 times between those two matchups here. It's fair to question what Buffalo has brewing right now, whether it's just underestimating opponents and not being ready for it, or there is actually a deeper rooted issue here that potentially needs to be addressed with Buffalo. Couple that with the fact that Carolina's defense has shown improvement from where they were last season. They're 7th in total yards per game. They're 10th against the pass, 8th against the run. And on top of that, as far as run defense is concerned, like their season average might not be as attractive as you might expect it to with how good they've looked the last few weeks, but they haven't allowed a team to rush over 100 yards since week 4. So the run defense has gotten it together. They're only giving up about 22 points per game right now. The Panthers could ultimately, welcome to the show, Feta. Hello, everyone. But that being said, I do think that the way this Panthers team has been playing right now, they could ultimately welcome Buffalo into their house and maybe kick them out the back door, to be completely upfront with you all. I am very worried about where this Buffalo Bills team is currently standing, and hopefully for their sake, they found themselves during this bye week and they're able to get back into the win column. But this is definitely not a walk in the park matchup with the way the Carolina Panthers have been playing for the last month or so. I'm going to take the Bills in this. And I've got to say, this is probably one of my shakier picks this week. If you would have said that to me like 2 or 3 weeks ago, that I would have felt this way about this game, then I would not have believed you. But I do think there is a bit of a cause for concern with Buffalo right now. I'm going to give them some benefit of the doubt in this one here. I'm going to take them on the road, but a 27-24, they really have to try to put the Carolina Panthers away type of win. And if Carolina comes away with the upset in this one, I would not be surprised. The next game we're going to be looking at here is going to be the Jets and the Bengals. And if I'm being completely upfront with this one here, I don't have a ton on this matchup because the way things seem to be shaping up, this feels like a pretty bad loss for the Jets, the way I'm seeing it right now. The Jets are going to be without Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, and on top of that, head coach Aaron Glenn refuses to reveal who the starting quarterback is going to be after comments made by owner Woody Johnson about his belief or potentially lack thereof in Justin Fields as their quarterback. It just feels like the Jets are kind of in that imploding stage right now where coming away with a win is going to be an absolute miracle. And Cincinnati right now is in a spot where it feels like they may have found something with Joe Flacco. And I can't believe that the Cleveland Browns were the team that gave them a quarterback to maybe keep their season alive. Whether that's just like in spite of or with disdain that they have towards the Pittsburgh Steelers and the way Mike Tomlin was talking about that trade, I don't know, but it's just very bizarre to me that this is the situation that the Bengals have found themselves in after the way they looked just a couple of weeks ago without him. Now, the Jets, if they want to win this, it's got to be through their defense somehow, because I don't really know what to make of that offense over there in New York with so much uncertainty around the quarterback spot and with no Garrett Wilson. Yes, you have a Breece Hall to work with, but it's just the offense in New York has not looked great already as it is, and I don't really know how taking away pieces from that offense is supposed to give you an even better result. And you see the way that Joe Flacco has been playing, 561 yards, 5 passing touchdowns in the 2 games that he's had, 0 interceptions for Cincinnati. They can clearly put points on the board. You're going to have to find a way to slow that down because T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are going to give you problems. Not to mention the fact that Chase Brown kind of found himself last week as well. So if this offense is really starting to figure it out, the defense has to find a way to stop them. Cincinnati's defense hasn't been perfect. The Jets' offense hasn't been perfect. So you kind of have like yourself a wash there. So if there's anything that the Jets are going to have to do to win this football game, it's got to be to find some sort of way to stop T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. And without Sauce Gardner, I genuinely don't know how that happens. So I'm looking at the Bengals for this one. I have a pretty comfortable win for Cincinnati. I could see maybe they get away with a stop or two here or there. I'm going 24-10 Cincinnati, and that feels like it might even be a little bit of a conservative end result for this game. Like if Cincinnati crosses 30 points in this game, I wouldn't be surprised. Now we'll take a look at the 49ers and the Texans. San Francisco continuing to win despite the hospital ward that they literally have fixated in their locker room at this point here. Houston, 2 wins this season so far. Both of those wins against bad teams. Of course, you have the one win against Tennessee and then the other win against a completely dismantled and broken and bruised and battered Baltimore Ravens team. If Houston wants to come away with a win in this one here, they've got to stop Christian McCaffrey. He's on one crazy run so far this season as he currently leads the NFL in total yards from scrimmage, 465 yards rushing, and then another 516 yards receiving. He's basically playing double duty for this offense because the wide receiver room has been absolutely decimated with injuries week in and week out. Somebody's missing or somebody new is missing. Somebody else is coming back in, but another person is exiting. And Christian McCaffrey has been the beneficiary of that, at least statistically speaking. Usage-wise, he's up there, but he's getting the job done so far. Mac Jones has done a good job leading this offense, and he's obviously had no issues going to Christian McCaffrey in the air. So if Houston wants to do anything, they've got to slow Christian McCaffrey down. It starts and stops with him because he is the key cog of this offense right now. So Houston needs their playmakers to step up. You need Derek Stingley Jr. to do his thing. And honestly, he might be the guy you need to be matching up across from Christian McCaffrey with the way he's seeing targets go his way through the air. But on top of that, you need your edge rushers to do their thing. You need them to get after and disrupt Mac Jones and prevent him from getting the ball. You need Danielle Hunter to win his matchups. You need Will Anderson Jr. to win their matchups there. It all comes down to this defense being able to slow down literally one key cog to this offense that basically makes everything go right now. Not to mention that George Kittle returned last week for San Francisco as he worked his way back into the offense. He's going to be more of a presence as well. But it all starts and stops with Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco right now. On the flip side, Houston, pretty banged up themselves offensively, and the wide receiver room could be a little bit thin. Nico Collins and Christian Kirk missing multiple practices this week here. Offensive line protection has also been abysmal for Houston, and I guess luckily for them, San Francisco's one of their weaknesses right now, because they lost Nick Bosa basically off the jump, is that their pass rush hasn't been spectacular, but the way that Texans O-line has handled itself in pass pro, this could be one of those games where they make San Francisco look better than the league's third worst pass rush that they are, statistically speaking, right now. The good thing for this game is, like, for Houston, San Francisco's defense is so banged up that, yes, with them potentially missing key players like a Nico Collins, like a Christian Kirk, or anyone else who may miss this one, you benefit from the fact that, yeah, San Francisco's banged up. The bad news is, despite all that, San Francisco continues to find success defensively regardless, and I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. With all of the injuries that they have dealt with this season so far, especially on the defensive side of the ball, from literally right out of the gate losing Nick Bosa, they're a top 10 defense on third down. They're only allowing about 20 points per game, which is good for 7th best in the NFL. They have still been an extremely effective unit. They have adopted the next man up mentality, and kind of out of necessity, because it feels like the injury bug has bitten the 49ers for the better part of like 2.5 years now at this point. So it's going to be a tough road for Houston. I would say that this matchup being in Houston definitely does benefit them to an extent. You know, they don't have the travel aspect on their side, but I think I'm going San Francisco. I was a little bit interested to see that, again, we don't do betting here, but I was interested to see the fact that Houston is still like the odds-on favorite for this one, at least against the spread. And I thought that was a little bit surprising just because, like, I like San Francisco. I think they can get the job done. So, I mean, if you're going to give me them as an underdog in this game here, that's pretty surprising to me. I think San Francisco, well coached, playing really, really well despite all their injuries. You're getting good quarterback play from your backup quarterback. There's not a ton of flaws with San Fran right now, despite the fact that they are so banged up and injured. But I'll take the 49ers 21-19. They squeak it out. I think Houston hangs around, makes a difficult defensive standoff type of game, but I do think the 49ers can get it done on the road. Now we'll look at the Browns and Patriots. You have one of the NFL's, if not one of, probably the most efficient quarterback at this current moment right now in Drake May, facing off against what a lot of people are starting to call the league's best defense, despite the fact that they have the league's worst offense on the opposite side of the field. It's pretty crazy how that is working itself out in Cleveland. I've never seen such a good defense be held back so much by an offense before in all of my years of NFL fandom. So we'll see what they can do this week. But I think the big question for New England, and it's one of those things that's gotten kind of masked because Drake May's played so well, is how this O-line, especially on the left side with two rookies, and your left guard, Jared Wilson, hasn't necessarily been spectacular so far. He's had his ups and downs so far this season. I'll be curious how they hang on against a Myles Garrett-led pass rush over there. They're allowing 22 sacks so far this season, the 5th highest pressure rate in the NFL, and the 5th highest sack rate on top of that. So teams are getting pressure. They're getting after New England. And honestly, if New England was throwing the football more and their offense wasn't as balanced as it was, these numbers might look even a little bit worse. But Drake May has done an excellent job against that. Despite all of that, Drake May is arguably, if not the best, one of the best so far this season, at least statistically speaking, against dealing with pressure. He has the 5th most passing yards when being pressured. He has the 4th best passer rating when being pressured, and nobody is completing the football at a higher rate than Drake May this season when facing the pressure, with a 63% completion rate, which is a wild number to look at when you consider where some of the other people in the league stand. Like, you have people that are as low as 40-ish% as far as completion rate is concerned when facing pressure. So Drake May's been great. You're obviously dealing with Myles Garrett and a really young offensive line on the left side of the football there, on the left side of the offensive line. Cleveland boasts a strong pass rush, 7th best sack rate in the NFL. They've already got 18 sacks this season, and they hold the fastest time to pressure, according to Next Gen Stats, at just 2.41 seconds per pressure. So they're able to get after the quarterback, one, but they're also the fastest team to generate that pressure and get after the quarterback. So something definitely worth watching there. On the flip side, I'm looking at New England's defense and how they fare against Quinshaw Judkins, because he's kind of the lifeblood and the offense of the Cleveland Browns right now, as this experiment rolls through with the quarterbacks going from Joe Flacco to now Dylan Gabriel. And who knows, at some point soon, it feels like we might be finally seeing Shedeur Sanders, because I don't think this offense is really doing a ton over there in Cleveland. And at some point, you got to give Shedeur an opportunity, right? So you look at Quinshaw Judkins and the success he's had so far this season: 467 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns. He's averaging 4.3 yards per clip. You have a New England run defense that's been stout. They've been really good. They went out and they got Milton Williams, and he and Christian Barmore are plugging things up in the middle there. You went and you got yourself a Robert Spillane, who sideline to sideline linebacker. You can say what you want about him in coverage, but he has been good against the run. He leads the team in defensive stops as an individual with 26, according to Next Gen Stats. So the defense is good. They're able to get the job done. 3rd in yards per game allowed with about 77 on the ground. 3rd best run stuff rate in the league. You're allowing 3.4 yards per attempt. You got two really interesting sides of the coin on that one. A running back, a rookie at that, who has been lighting it up on the ground. It is like the engine for this offense over there in Cleveland, going up against a run defense that has been very good itself. I think this contest ends up being lower scoring. It's going to be a bit of a grind, and I honestly think it's going to be kind of ugly. One of those, if you're not a Pats or Browns fan, you probably don't want this one up on your screen if you're using that multi-view like I do every single week. But I like the Patriots getting the job done. 17-13. Ugly contest. You're flipping past this one and watching a different game if you have the choice to do so. We'll look at the Giants and Eagles next, and Philadelphia hosting the Giants this time around. And I think an Eagles team that's looking to make right for their first matchup here. And Philadelphia is rocking the Kelly Greens this week. I always love when they do this. One of my favorite uniforms in the NFL whenever it comes around. For Philadelphia, It starts with stopping the run and containing Jackson Dart. This game is all about making good on what you failed to do defensively the first time around when these two teams met. Cam Scatabo went for 98 yards. He was averaging 5.2 yards per attempt in game number 1. You had Jackson Dart go for like another 60 or so yards on the ground, maybe a little bit less. And Philadelphia, all season long, they have been prone to letting teams run the ball fairly efficiently. For a team that was so good defensively last year, it's been, and like you look at the guys that you have up front too, still on the interior, at least on the D line, it's surprising. It is, but they're letting teams move. And they finally had a good game against the run with Minnesota last week, allowing only about 89 yards on the ground. So maybe that was the start of something as this defense tries to figure itself out. But you have to make good on that. You can't let Jackson Dart kill you on the ground the way he was doing the first time around. This is a rookie quarterback you're going up against. You do kind of have to expect the unexpected with his play style, and just that's something you get from those young rookie quarterbacks, is a little bit more unpredictability because they're willing to do whatever they have to do to get the job done. So you can't let him do that to you. Cam Scatabo's a battering ram. He's going to do what he's going to do, but you got to be tough up front. You need those guys in the middle of that defense. You need an all-pro like a Zach Bond to be able to set the edges for you and prevent him from beating you to the outside. You need to be able to slow down that run game. On the opposite side, the Giants, they come in and the defense is looking pretty banged up, and they did hold Philadelphia to just 17 points in their first matchup. And I'll be curious to see if that ends up being the case this time around, because Paulson Adebo, Brian Burns, Chauncey Golston, and Javon Holland all did not participate Wednesday or Thursday in practice. I don't have Friday's practice reports, unfortunately, at the time of me recording this, but that doesn't bode well for a defense that needs to be on its A game. You have a Philadelphia offense who a lot of conversation's been going on around their identity and what they are. Well, it seems like the last 3 weeks, they may have actually figured out what they're going to need to do this year. And it's going to be what everyone was kind of doubting Jalen Hurts about for the last couple of seasons. And maybe it's just because of the tush push. I don't know. But I do remember a time when Jalen Hurts used to throw the football a lot more, and it kind of went away because you got Saquon Barkley. The tush push is working. You're a run-first offense. Now, last 3 weeks, no less than 257 net passing yards for the team. And last week, you saw north of 300 yards passing for Jalen Hurts. Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown combining for north of 300 receiving yards as a duo. It seems like they're throwing the football now. And you're looking at pass rushers, you're looking at corner, you're looking at safety, you're looking at a handful of guys, starting players on both the defensive front and in your secondary, potentially missing this matchup when the offense that you're going up against is finally figuring out how to throw the football effectively this year and realizing, maybe we're not the run-first team we were last year, maybe we're throwing the football instead. I think that could be a problem for the Giants. This feels like a make-a-good game for Philadelphia. It's definitely a trap game. It's a division rival that has been dealing with some wild stuff the last few weeks. You look at the collapse last week. They should be reeling. Philadelphia should be able to get the better of them here at home. And rocking the Kelly Greens, you got to get it done in front of your home crowd. I'll take the Eagles 30-20, but I don't think the Giants just give it to them. The Giants are going to make them earn it like they did the first time around, except Philadelphia will actually get the win this time around, in my opinion. Now we'll look at the Bucs and the Saints, and this is another one of those games I don't have a ton on, but it's definitely worth discussing here. The Saints are one of those teams that I'm kind of like default picking them to lose games this year because I've had them picked as one of the bottom 3 teams in the NFL even prior to the season starting, and so far they're in that ballpark. If not, they're just outside at like 4 or 5. But the Buccaneers do have some injury concerns in this game here. No Hassan Reddick, no Chris Godwin. Bucky Irving's obviously been missing time for a while here, but it does sound like you'll at least have Vita Vea play. But there are some injury concerns. You obviously lost Mike Evans last week as well that you need to keep an eye on for Tampa Bay here. I do, though, have my concerns about Spencer Rattler and what we saw from him last week. It feels like against Chicago, because a lot of people were talking about is Spencer Rattler surprisingly taking care of the football and actually having a pretty good season. And 4 turnovers is 4 turnovers. It's not too often that something like that happens, and it feels like things might have unraveled a bit for this New Orleans offense. You, of course, still have a Chris Olave to work with and the ageless Alvin Kamara, who's still at least serviceable for you, but I am very interested in seeing what Spencer Rattler looks like in this game, coming off of what was a literal disaster of a matchup here. That's one of those games that could make or break a player, especially in the stage of his career where Spencer Rattler is. Like all eyes should be on Spencer Rattler, whether you're a Saints fan or a Bucs fan for this game, because it feels like how he reacts to that last week's performance will very much dictate what this game looks like. Not even so much like the end result, but just like, is this Saints once again a tough out, maybe fight to the finish, but make the Buccaneers earn their win, or like the Saints just get their doors blown off. On the flip side, conversation's kind of similar to Baker Mayfield. Obviously not nearly as bad of a performance, but for those that were banging the table about Baker Mayfield for MVP, I was even kind of in that conversation at certain points myself. Not necessarily the greatest game last week. You look at Baker's play, little disheartening. You lose Mike Evans. Chris Godwin's still not available for you. Bucky Irving's still not available for you. You're going to be missing an offensive lineman in this game as well. Hopefully Emeka Egbuka's feeling a little bit better. I definitely questioned whether he should have even played last week, and I still kind of feel like hindsight's always 20/20, but I do kind of feel like he should not have played in that game, and this should have been his comeback moment here. But here we are. How's his hamstring looking? If he's feeling even better than he did last week and he's getting more and more back to normal, maybe he's able to open up that offense and continue his strong rookie campaign that he's been having. And you're leaning on Rachaad White and Sean Tucker to do what they've done best in the absence of Bucky Irving, and that's run the football fairly effectively. New Orleans is a bottom 10 run defense this season. You should be able to take advantage. I'll give the Buccaneers a W here. I have them winning, but I have them winning 24-20. I think the Saints hang around. I don't expect Spencer Rattler to have as nearly a bad performance as he did last week. I think a lot of that has to do with just how good Chicago is defensively right now and how aggressive they are as a defense. But I do think ultimately the Bucs get the job done, but the Saints, as they have been doing, forcing opponents to earn their W's against them, 24-20, tight loss for New Orleans. Buccaneers squeak away against the division rival. Now we'll take a look at the Cowboys and the Broncos here. CeeDee Lamb obviously back in the fold for this Cowboys offense led to an offensive explosion here. And Denver themselves scraping by the last couple of weeks definitely does not make Denver as big of a favorite as I would have said maybe a couple of weeks ago prior to their last two W's against the Jets and then that crazy comeback effort against the Giants last week. This is a top-end offense in Dallas going up against a top-end defense in Denver, and I do think that's where this game kind of starts and stops here. You look at Denver's defense, third in total yards per game allowed, 11 touchdowns allowed total this season, tied for second best in the NFL. They are fourth in points per game allowed at about 18 points per game right now. And then you got Dallas coming in. First in yards per game, third in touchdowns scored with 24 on the season, second in points per game scored at 31 behind only the Indianapolis Colts. George Pickens and the connection he has built with Dak Prescott in the absence of CeeDee Lamb, you don't really typically say something like this very often, but I'm going to say it. It was almost like CeeDee Lamb's injury was kind of to like the benefit of the offense in the long term because it allowed Dak Prescott and George Pickens to really develop a rapport together because he got to work with Pickens as a number one. And respectfully, George Pickens was a legit number one in Pittsburgh. They just didn't want to deal with him anymore. Now you're dealing with two number one wide receivers. Dak is clearly comfortable throwing to George Pickens now, and he's obviously comfortable throwing to CeeDee Lamb. Those two have been racking up numbers for the better part of the last like half a decade at this point together. This passing attack could be a problem, but a lot of it does come down with that Denver's pass rush and what they're able to do. Denver, 34 sacks on the season, first by a bit of a margin there, 12.8% sack rate, first place, only team in the NFL with a sack rate in the double digits, and they're at basically about 13%. Pressure rate sitting at first as well at about 47.2%. They're about 5% higher than the second place team behind them. They have 7 players with 2 or more sacks so far this season, and they're led, of course, by who is making a household name for himself in Nick Bonito, who has 8 sacks on the season, third best in the NFL, paired alongside Jonathan Cooper, who has 6 sacks himself. This pass rush has been a problem. Dallas's offensive line, though, has done a good job. 8 sacks allowed so far this season, which is second fewest in the NFL. They have the 6th lowest pressure rate, and they have the second longest time till pressure as well. They're able to keep guys away from Dak Prescott, which is great for the way this offense has been working. And so I do think that Dallas, at least offensively, matches up extremely well. The age-old question, though, at least for this season so far for Dallas, is can they stop anyone on offense? And they did like a solid job, I guess you could say, against the Commanders team last week, but you can maybe throw a little bit of an asterisk on there with just how injured and battered they were going into that game and as the game played itself out. But I do think that the real question here for this game, less so what Dallas's defense can do against Denver's offense, and more so, can Denver's offense keep up with Dallas? Something tells me Dallas might have themselves another big performance here, and it could be something in line with, maybe a little bit of what we got from the Giants last week, but I don't think that the Cowboys offense takes their foot off the gas, and I don't know if last week, if it's Dallas in the Giants situation against Denver, if Denver makes that comeback. So I'm going to go Dallas on this with the upset victory on the road. I think it's a good contest. I think it's entertaining. I do think that Denver's defense, though, does hold Dallas in check somewhat, but I have the Cowboys winning 27-26. Tight contest. They pull off a win. The squeaking by the last few weeks that Denver has been doing has made me a little bit like 50-50 on how I'm feeling about them right now. And I do think that they might be due for a loss. And this is where I think Dallas comes into play here, and the offense just ends up being a little bit too much. And the inconsistency that we've seen from Denver's offense through this season maybe finally catches up with them going up against one of these high-powered offenses in the NFL. The next one, Colts and Titans. I'm taking the Colts. I have the Colts winning 31-16. Tennessee's the worst team in the NFL, not named the New York Jets. And when you just look at the discrepancies between these two teams, Indianapolis, league best, about 33 points per game scored. Tennessee, league worst, about 14 points per game scored. You look at the way Jonathan Taylor's been playing, 697 yards on the ground, 10 rushing touchdowns, both best in the NFL, to the Titans' run defense, which is the league's fourth worst defense, allowing about 140 yards on the ground. If the Colts find a way to lose this game, I could have never told you I would have saw it coming. Simply put. And then to wrap up the Sunday's predictions, we have the Packers and Steelers matchup here. Aaron Rodgers taking on his former team in the Green Bay Packers, but he is welcoming them into Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's defense, big question mark surrounding them right now. Really good stretch of games. Last week, though, they kind of fell back into the old ways of what we saw from the first couple of games this season. Can that defense get back on track is my big question there. 470 total yards allowed against Cincinnati. 328 were through the air. 142 were on the ground. They were nearly averaging 6 sacks per game for 3 straight weeks before last week. Pass rush kind of fell off. And going up against the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line that I thought they might feast against, came away with only 2 sacks. A little bit surprised with that. Now you have Green Bay coming into town, and Jordan Love, who right now, only 10 sacks on him so far this season, has been protected extremely well. This is again, another opportunity, but this time you're going up against what is, at least this season, been a good pass-protecting offensive line, a good test for you, especially when you fail to really do anything against, again, a Bengals line that's not impressive by any means to this point. Green Bay is also one of the most efficient offenses in the NFL. They're scoring on about 47.5% of their offensive drives, which is good for 5th best in the NFL. So you're basically talking every other drive putting points on the board for Green Bay. They're also ranked 3rd in the NFL in EPA per play on offense right now for you nerds out there. Expected points added. They're doing an excellent job on offense, finding ways to get points on the board. Even if it's just field goals, they're still doing it. And on top of that, they could be getting a boost this week, as it sounds like Christian Watson, the wide receiver's been missing time since last year, could be back in the mix. And a secondary that has looked good, but also had some questionable moments so far this season, could really be put to the test going up against this Green Bay Packers offense. On the flip side, I'm looking at Micah Parsons, and I'm looking at his ability to help lead this pass-rushing Green Bay and in disrupting Aaron Rodgers. For all the love that I just gave the Green Bay offense and efficiency, you have to look at what Aaron Rodgers has been doing this season and respect it. Micah Parsons, obviously, game wrecker, leads the NFL in individual pressures with 41. And Green Bay's pass rush overall, though, not necessarily the most feared by any mean. They've been about average to like slightly above, below, give or take, depending on the week. Micah Parsons, honestly, in hindsight, was not only a massive move for this team, but like necessary, because you look at what he has done as an individual on this team and the numbers he brings to the team's total when it comes to rushing the passer. Without him, I would not really want to know where that group is at, because it's probably not good. That being said, Aaron Rodgers, unsurprisingly, as he has been his entire career, very good at getting the football out and getting it out quickly. He currently has the third fastest time to throw in the NFL right now, and he gets the ball out so quickly to the first guy he needs to get it to each and every single week. That's led to Rodgers being sacked one of the least in the NFL, and on top of that, seeing pressure amongst the least in the NFL. 9 sacks, fourth best pressure rate that anyone's seen as a quarterback so far this season. It's going to fall on Micah Parsons to get after him, challenge that Steelers offensive line that has been fine, but has benefited from the fact that Aaron Rodgers is just so good at getting the football out. This was a tough one to pick, and arguably the toughest game of the week, in my opinion. You have two teams, 4 wins, fighting for playoff spots, trying to keep the leads in their divisions and doing what they're doing. And do you like Pittsburgh at home? Aaron Rodgers looking to get revenge against his second former team now. There's a lot of fun, interesting, intertwining storylines here. Then you have like the Green Bay Packers, who are 4-1-1. People are doubting what they actually are because of that tie, and then ultimately the loss to the Browns. So like this is kind of like a gotta have it, gotta prove it type of game for Green Bay. A lot riding for both of these teams in a Sunday night football clash, but ultimately I settled on the Steelers as the underdog at home here. This is one of those games that I'm so nervous about because I feel like whatever I pick, the opposite result ends up happening. Like there's no winning for this one in my eyes. So unfortunately, if you're a Steelers fan and you believe the way I feel, maybe they end up losing this one because I'm taking Pittsburgh, but I like the Steelers to get the job done at home here. Some of those doubts about Green Bay have crept into my mind a little bit, and I honestly have some of those doubts for Pittsburgh as well and just what we've seen from them in their 2 losses. But ultimately here, something is in my gut, and it's telling me Pittsburgh at home, prime time. If this is really Aaron Rodgers' last dance, one last time to get a good opportunity to get a W over the Green Bay Packers, and I feel like he can get the job done. So gut feeling on this one, very big gut feeling. Give me the Steelers 21-20. It's a dogfight at, I know it's a Creature, but I want to call it Heinz Field. Those are my predictions, though, going into Sunday for Week 8 of the NFL. As always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. Make sure you are subscribed. We'll do Monday night's game on Sunday early in the day before the early window kicks off. So make sure you don't miss out there. But like I said, if you made it to the end, greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all on Monday or Sunday for that Monday Night Football preview. Have a good one.